Welcome back to The Path Forward. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and we're coming to you live from sunny Austin ISD. And I have my special guest, Jeremy Striffler, who is the Director of Real Estate for Austin ISD.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining me. It's a pretty exciting time for you guys. I hear there's some bond possibilities coming down the road, maybe later in the year. But before we get out to that, talk about the start of school. What are you guys ramping up for? Is there an energy in the air in Austin ISD?
Yeah, so of course, tensions are high as school starts next week from when we're recording. And, given recent events in Texas, safety is our top priority. And so we've been really working hard, not only through kind of the guidance that has come from the state level, but just with our own AISD police department to get organized and really make sure that we've got a clear plan and that we're able to communicate that to the campuses, to our students and families and staff so that they feel confident as they enter into a new school year. And we can certainly talk about the bond, about how beyond the immediate plans and strategies that we're implementing, how the bond can help us further secure our schools.
Well, one of the things that we've been having conversations with superintendents around the state is security, right? And all of the things that come along with that. I don't necessarily know that our communities know how difficult a problem, how many variables we're trying to solve for. So I commend you guys for being proactive and making it a community effort. But aside from the security aspect, what about the positive, the energy? There's always that excitement coming back to school. What are you feeling from the staff just in gearing up for the start?
Yeah, I think we've obviously the last few years have been some of the most challenging for the education sector, for our students as well as the staff. And, with so many changes taking place, even in the middle of a school year, right? Suddenly we're in person, we're back out, or we have masks, we don't have masks. Mm-hmm. And so this focus of this year is really to reconnect, re-energize, this kind of reunite together with the idea that the hope that this school year will look like what we have known school to look like in the past, pre-pandemic. And with that, we have an interim superintendent. And I think he's just immediately over the summer since he started has brought just a great energy and focus for our staff, especially as we have a lot of new teachers coming in, et cetera. It's difficult when you have that change in leadership, but I think he's setting a good tone so far, and I appreciate that he's so proactive in making time to make sure he's in person with everyone in terms of like our campuses. As you can imagine, with the start of a school year,
absolutely,
you have the district leadership meeting, then the principals and assistant principals, then the teachers, then the janitorial service and the bus drivers, and he is meeting with everyone and making sure that they know that from the top down, that, we're here to have a successful school year and that we really need to, again, get that energy going to make people feel comfortable after so much kind of tumultuous.
It's been tough. I mean, it's a tough couple of years for everybody. And, starting up, the positive energy is so important. So that's great that you guys feel that energy and that buzz of hopefully getting back to some sense of normalcy. Before we jump in to some of the specifics with potential bond options for the district. So director of real estate, that's not a common position that you find in a lot of school districts. How did you get into that?
Sure. So my background is in commercial real estate.
Okay.
I had worked primarily over the last 15 years in occupier services, where I was representing corporate users of space, primarily office, helping them rent office space and sometimes buy office space, but also had spent quite a bit of time similarly representing nonprofits. And that ranged from everyone from religious institutions to education providers to just kind of your general nonprofits like a Big Brothers Big Sisters,
Gotcha.
Volunteers of America, but always through the lens of helping those who are using space compared to investing in space. And I really enjoyed my work with school districts and charter schools. And when I saw this opportunity open, I thought, this is, to your point, kind of unique to be able to help the school district think about the strategy behind having a portfolio of properties. And, Austin being a rather large urban school district,
Mm-hmm.
we're the 7th largest employer. And in addition to that, we have over 2,200 acres of land and 130 plus properties. And so while we are not seeing this as an investor might, right? We're not buying and selling stuff
Right.
throughout the year, but it's more so from the lens of good stewardship.
Sure.
And with these being public tax dollar assets, how can we leverage those to the benefit of the community? And so trying to think a little differently in a way that's more proactive than reactive, which I think is what you often find with school districts and charter schools, private schools, et cetera.
Say it ain't so. Education moves a little slowly sometimes. Yeah, we often find ourselves reactive as opposed to looking down the road and trying to predict what are the things we're going to need and how do we get there before there's a catastrophe, or how do we get there before there's a need, right? Let's anticipate the next level of what our kids are going to need and what our communities are going to need. So you jumped into that realm. Is that what you went to school for? Or how, I mean, surely you were like, all right, guys, yeah, when, it's show and tell day, like I want to be commercial real estate, I want to work for nonprofits. Like, how did it get to, all right, that's my thing. That's my niche. That's my passion.
Sure. So no, but I did not study commercial real estate or think about it, even really have a idea of it growing up. I was an English major in undergrad.
You wanted to be a teacher?
Potentially. And I come from a family of teachers.
Okay.
And so post-college was, English majors often lead to, if not teaching, but, more creative type roles.
Right.
And so was looking for a role in marketing and found one with a REIT based in New York City that owned everything from New York City office buildings to shopping malls, strip centers, kind of all throughout the New York tri-state area. And so I was helping them in their retail division, both helping their leasing team try to market the malls to H&M and
Right.
Whole Foods and Forever 21 and a lot of mall stores that are now gone. But
Hot Topic or something
exactly,
like that? Yeah, gotcha.
Exactly. And then also helping the malls market themselves to shoppers.
Sure.
And trying to across, we had a dozen malls trying to get some uniformity. So that way they could all benefit from some economies of scale in terms of like, let's get you all a new website. Let's all roll out a gift card program. And throughout all that work, I kind of discovered, wow, I really like real estate. I think what I latched onto so much was it's a very tangible business in the sense that we all can relate immediately to the idea of like, oh yeah, I need a store to buy things. I need a restaurant to eat things,
Sure.
I need an office to work, et cetera. And so that immediacy of the business was really appealing to me. I can't really explain why, what the appeal is, but that has always like kept me interested. And then I went to grad school to kind of sharpen my tools, if you will. I, as an English major, I knew how to read, write, and research well, but was lacking in maybe some of my more
it's okay. You can
finance acumen,
your
and
math
skills. So
Yeah.
a lot of I did a MBA in international business through St. John's University. And so, yeah, a lot of my focus is math and really getting comfortable with Excel charts and everything. And so kind of was able to marry a more background in marketing and reading, writing, et cetera, and with kind of now the finance component that came from the MBA.
Sure.
And I wanted to get right back into commercial real estate when I graduated. And so I actually moved to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, because there's so many retailers based there, and I had family, and so Target, Best Buy, Buffalo Wild Wings, all these retailer kind of headquarters there. And my thought was, oh, I could work in one of their real estate departments, help them figure out where to open their new store. My timing was a little off because I graduated in the fall of 2010. Everyone's still coming out of the recession.
Right.
And so I ended up with Cushman and Wakefield.
Yeah.
On the consulting side,
restoration services. Yeah, they do a lot of restoration, building services. Cushman Wakefield.
Everything related to real estate. I mean, from brokerage to property management, construction management, facilities, etc. And yeah, so found my way with them because they were responding to kind of the change in the commercial real estate industry that was happening at the time in terms of advisory services. And then that led me into working with the occupier services group, which I described, of kind of helping anyone buy, sell, lease space in terms of if they were using it, I was helping them either at the beginning of that process or at the end. If they said, well, I no longer have a use for that,
what do we do with it?
I would step in there as well.
So let's dive into a little bit about the upcoming bond, but I want to do it in a little bit different way. So the real estate market in and around Austin, obviously it's gone up dramatically, right? Can you explain a little bit about what that causes, some of the snowball effect in terms of your teacher housing and employee housing for the district, and then that can lead us into some of the innovative things that you guys are trying to do to mitigate some of those issues?
Sure. Well, yeah, certainly Austin has an affordability crisis going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly seeing housing costs go up, whether that's ownership or rental. But wages are not keeping up.
Sure.
And we can have a whole conversation just about the constraints on the education funding model across the country.
That's a whole series by itself.
So, absolutely. But so we have some constraints in terms of being able to easily move the needle on wages. And so we're facing these, constraints in terms of housing costs going up for our staff and for our families.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're also seeing is displacement then, where either staff has longer commutes and also families moving out. And then construction costs continue to rise.
Sure.
And so, when you have the opportunity with a bond to collect funds, have a funding model that is not subject to any sharing with the state, that can be 100% dedicated to improving your facilities, your technology, your stadiums, everything that impacts that student's life from kindergarten through 12th grade, without damaging or the general fund, right? We don't have to take money away from the day-to-day running of a school.
Which you've already budgeted for your staffing and your maintenance and operations.
We find it really important to leverage that, because what a bond does also, if you do it well, by modernizing your school buildings, removing deficiencies. So you're cutting down your utility costs, you're cutting down your maintenance costs, which are all money that's coming out of your general fund each year. That frees up more money that can be put towards wages, can be put towards programming, et cetera. And so we see the bond as something that has not only the immediate impact on our students and just creating better learning environments, but also then having that trickle-down effect where now we're saving dollars because we've made these investments in our campuses that have made our budget, our general budget, more flexible because now we have a little bit more breathing room. For example, this past year, we spent almost $2 million just renting HVAC and chiller equipment, to make sure the classrooms are, temperate. And so by using bond dollars instead to buy new chillers, buy new HVAC equipment, that's, it seems such a drop in the bucket, but even that, $2 million now goes to something better. And even just the amount of money we spend on repairs each year,
Oh yeah.
So just cutting that down, and same thing, utilities. That's after wages. That's probably one of our biggest costs.
What are some of the creative ideas? And I'm not going to just hold it to Austin ISD, but let's just say we're spitballing and we're talking about potentially repurposing space or utilizing space differently. Can you share any of the creative ideas that have come to the forefront?
Sure. So it is kind of tied to bond in a way, and because for better or for worse, over past programs, bond packages, sometimes they come with closures.
Hmm.
Thankfully, this 2022 bond, there are no school closures planned, but in 2017 we did.
Sure.
And so over the last few years, we had a few, campuses close, and now we are thinking, what do we do with them, right?
Right.
And you're in a growing city like Austin, and land is at such a premium.
Right.
As we mentioned, this affordability crisis, we're trying to think, how do we leverage that land to serve the community? And it's tied to, again, that conversation about why you use bond dollars and the funding model, in the sense
Right.
that I could sell a piece of land and get a good chunk of change right now in Austin. However, it's a one-time check,
Hmm.
and it puts a Band-Aid over something in the budget, compared to what we've started thinking about is, with these underutilized sites, where can we have kind of a twofold investment? One that is in terms of the future use, being something that specifically housing, which is our main focus. How can we provide a benefit to the community by providing affordable housing,
Right.
for our staff and families, and affordable relative to their wages? So there's a big range in terms of when we talk about affordability.
Sure.
So we have that as kind of a primary focus, but then secondary, can we generate revenue from that partnership?
Sure.
Because we're not in a position to build the housing ourselves and manage all this stuff, right? So we're going to go find a partner to do that. But so can we generate revenue from that through a ground lease,
Hmm.
compared to just selling it to the highest bidder, right? Again, take that one-time check, and now I'm sure in your experience, you get a one-time check, people find use of that money immediately.
Of course.
That money's gone, compared to if we can budget for the fact that now we have a reoccurring revenue source from one, if not multiple properties, where we have these closed school sites that now we've leveraged and put to a new use, and not let them just sit fallow. Now we can have revenue to think about, what can we do with that revenue, right? And that can translate into other employer assisted housing programs, in terms of helping staff with down payments on house or closing costs or rent deposits, and it could also just go to other programming that I'm not thinking about at the moment. My focus being real estate is often tied
Right,
to housing and programs like that. But we think about this even with our facility rentals. We have 113 campuses. They're available to the public, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, to rent after school hours, as
Mhm.
long as the use is not detrimental to the building, and that we're not going to have a big wear and tear. But we have everyone from church groups to running groups using the tracks, to after school programs that
Right,
are
right.
hey, I'll pay your kid, or
Right.
you pay me and I'll teach your kid how to play chess and stuff like that, right? And what we're trying to do even with that too is, similarly, where do we have the reoccurring revenue so we can budget for that? Because again, it's that difference of being proactive versus reactive, where, oh, I just got some money and now I got to figure out what to do with it, compared to saying, oh, I can budget that I'm going to have this much of income coming in. Now let's think differently about what I can do with that, rather than finding the money. I don't know how to articulate that
No, I
well,
understand what
but
you're saying.
the kind of the money coming after the thought,
Right.
compared to knowing up front, well, I got the money, now let's think about what we can do with it.
So, has there been any discussion about possibly repurposing for like these innovation hubs that seem to be popping up all over the country, or mixed use space between industry and the district? And obviously housing would be a piece of that, but just trying to get out of the box a little bit and think through, all right, we've got real estate. We don't necessarily want to part ways with it. So who else could be aligned for our district values, our district vision, but also could make great use of it and be a great partner. Any thoughts on, hey, this is where that could lead? And I don't want you to say specifically for Austin ISD, but just in general, just as things come up, because these ideas are happening all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think two things are key, right? How does it serve the mission of the district,
Mhm.
right? Is it mission aligned and not we're just getting into bed with some partner that really has nothing to do with the benefit of our students and families in
Correct.
terms of
We're
like,
going to assume that's
yeah. So
that's
is it
been
mission aligned,
accounted for.
and then how does it respond to community needs and housing, right? That's a clear need in Austin, but across the country. I mean, there's
Mhm.
housing shortage across the U.S. right now that we're dealing with, and affordability too. But there are other community needs that range from, and things that we've been thinking about and heard in our process, our community engagement process was, that early childhood centers, pre-K, daycare,
Sure.
where beyond what we offer, right? And affordable daycare, childcare services
Mhm.
is really important. So thinking about, well, you have a school building, while it's vague, it lends itself naturally to that type of educational use. But it's something that goes, and that's where we can partner with providers who, that's their bread and butter, and
Sure.
can expand upon what we can currently afford in our budget in terms of where we can offer pre-K, especially going down to like infant, of what people like to say would just be daycare, type
Right.
services.
Right.
Uh, so that's been something we've been thinking about. And then also from, again, with the lens of like education, is partnering with organizations like the city and the economic development
Mhm.
um,
But I mean,
group here about having cultural trusts and providing space for makers, artisans, musicians, etc. And that naturally, I think to me, has an education component to it, right? Because it's somewhere where you can easily bring in the students to learn from these artists and musicians, etc. So, you can have that natural synergy, but you're providing those organizations or individuals with space that right now they often don't have access to because they're competing with commercial users
sure.
for everything from just exhibition space to studio space, etc. So that's been kind of on our radar. We've heard, in terms of also post high school
Well, yeah.
programs,
What about industry? Like you've got so much industry here. I would think that it's a great place to be to reach out and form some partnerships with all of your industry that's localized.
yeah, and hopefully we get there. I think we're at the start of
Yeah,
a
it's not easy yet.
start of a strategy that says let's think differently about vacant properties,
Mhm.
and we try to ground it with conversations with the community as a starting place.
Mhm.
I think the conversation opens itself up. Right now we have 5 sites, and 4 of which are very close to each other.
Sure.
And so there's a kind of a dialogue
Yeah.
between those sites that
All
has
that
to
all that
happen.
matters. The logistics, the
But
location, all of that stuff.
if you can build success upon success and earn some trust with the community, I think that's, to your point, where you can think bigger and broader and go beyond kind of those immediate needs that are, clearly important, but like thinking differently about these sites. And something that we've, again, trying to be proactive in the past year is doing a portfolio evaluation, which was as much to just get a little, put a thumb in the air, get a good read on like, whoa, what is it worth? What do we have? What it's worth? But also to just give us a chance to kind of make sure we're clear on what do we own.
Mhm.
And so like finding all these parcels, and like we were finding stuff like little bits and pieces that like people hadn't documented, and not to say they were
No, it's a large task.
It's a large task
It's
when
a
you have
large
over
task.
2,200 acres spread across a city, trying to organize all that information. And the reason I bring that up is just now that we're clear on what we own, we can start having a better conversation at the leadership level about thinking about our existing sites. Again, never to the detriment of education. That's always paramount, right? In terms of like a campus the function of a campus has to be able to happen and not be interfered with. But can we start looking at these campuses and saying, if it's a 80-acre
Right.
campus,
What else can go
do
there?
we need 80 acres for
Right.
the school's use, or is there extra
Right.
underutilized land here where now we can start bringing in some partners and really be dynamic with what it means to be a school district? How are we serving a student beyond just what happens in the classroom?
In terms of the upcoming bond, what are the three big components, the three big facts that you want to leave with anybody that may be watching or any community members?
Sure. I'd say first, safety is a top priority. There is money being allocated for everything from installing secure vestibules at every campus, fencing where it's needed, addressing doors and locks, but also, which is the harder part about safety, and it's a harder conversation, right? There's the tactile things that we think about, but we're also, we've got money set aside for mental health centers at our campuses, and beyond the bond, looking at policy around that as well.
Okay.
Because there's multiple ways to address how do you strengthen your community to make it more secure beyond just putting locks and stuff. But that is as much important. So first, safety is one of the top priorities of this bond. Second, we're thinking about every student every day. And so while there are targeted campuses that are going to get, full modernizations, which means either we're going to gut and reno their existing building, or we're going to build them a totally new building on their campus and scrap the old one. Every single campus, we're addressing deficiencies. If it's broke today, it's going to get fixed. Every campus all the high schools are going to get new athletic fields, which make them more usable, not only for the high schools, but also the middle schools that are in their vertical team, which allows them to stay in their community when they have their big games, right? And not have to go drive to while we have these great district-wide stadiums. It's so burdensome on those facilities to have all our high schools, convene on there. And there is something to be said to be able to go out to the football field on your campus for your games. I mean, I'm maybe nostalgic about that of just my own high school experience. There was something about that environment where, you're playing right outside the gym, or your classroom. So, that kind of investment, that upgrading all our high school facilities, which impacts our middle schools and elementary schools, because they'll be able to also utilize that. Investments in SPED across the district, investments in CTE across the district, musical instruments, like fine arts.
Give me three. Come on, keep it to three. Keep it to three.
Yeah. So, just that idea though.
So everybody's getting something, right?
There's that idea that we are making sure across the district there are improvements. So safety, that every student every day is going to be impacted by this bond.
Gotcha.
And that third, we are really continuing to bring learning into the 21st century here. That when we look at facilities, we don't only look at the condition of them, we look at their educational suitability. And that when we modernize a campus, we are bringing it into a new standard that continues to evolve as we learn things, as the whole country learns things about what education looks like. And even one of the things we're going to be exploring with this bond is universal design, really thinking differently about a school that, you don't just create one classroom for SPED, that the whole building is accessible to those SPED students. And so making sure that the thought about what a school looks like continues to evolve with the students. So I would say those are kind of the big components. And again, it's the benefit of the bond is it's access to funds that we otherwise would be in competition with dollars that have to go to our everyday
Sure. They're running,
budget.
yeah, their maintenance operation. Absolutely. Well, that's exciting. I particularly as you're looking to evolve classrooms and with the learning environment, I think I'm seeing that both higher ed and K-12 across the country, and building spaces that look like the workplace as opposed to four walls and 30 desks. So I'm interested to see, because it's going to be a little bit, not a little bit, it's going to be a lot different for teachers flowing through something that may not be uniform or may not be your common classroom that you've always taught in. So, but if you walk into the job market, there's a whole wide array of setups and how people do their work. So it'll be interesting to see how education can try to catch up with some of those industry standards about how we expect employees to do their work and be successful in their careers. So what would be the one takeaway today from our conversation here in Austin, Texas, Austin ISD? Leave us with something that, hey, this is going to be our charge, our mission moving forward this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Austin ISD understands that we need to be in the business of anything that impacts our students. And so while that certainly immediately translates into what happens on campus, but we're also thinking about what happens to them outside the classroom. And that's why we have such a focus right now on how we can address the affordability crisis through building housing on underutilized sites. When you think about just this past weekend, we had a back to school bash. We had thousands of students. We gave out backpacks, but we also gave them free haircuts and eye exams and vaccines. And how many students are we giving free lunch and breakfast to, right? So we're addressing these fundamental needs of the students to make sure that they can be focused and successful in the classroom. And housing totally relates to that, right?
There's no doubt.
A student who's confident in their housing, that doesn't have that worry kind of always overshadowing them every day about that their environment's not stable. I think that makes for better learners, and similarly for our staff as well. If we can make sure they can afford to live in the communities they serve, those students will benefit so much more than, because those teachers will understand where they're coming from compared to our teachers having to drive in 40 minutes, an hour in from suburbs because that's the only place they can afford to live.
Fair enough. Jeremy, I want to thank you for visiting with us today on the show, and I look forward to Austin ISD's progress on the bond, and hopefully that'll entail a little bit of housing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.